So, most of us drive or travel on a daily basis. What is the first thing you do when you get in the car? Do you put your seatbelt on, or do you put the key in the ignition and turn the car on, start backing out of the driveway? As you're backing out of the driveway or your parking spot, then you put your seatbelt on. You should think about that, okay? And we're going to talk about seatbelts later on. Most of us feel like we have to rush. Everywhere we go, we have to rush. We don't have time for this. We got to rush. Drive the speed limit. What is the speed limit? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? So one of the handouts that I provided to you is the 10 facts employers must know about driving safety. So that's just something for you to look at. We're pretty much going to go through all that material in various slides this morning. So I want you to think about your driving habits, whether we want to admit to it or not. All of us have a little bit of a lead foot. Think about when do you use your turn signals when you're changing lanes? Do you get aggressive driving when you get angry or frustrated because somebody's beeping the horn at you or tailgating you? What do? Are you distracted when you're driving? Are you on the cell phone? Are you fiddling with the radio? Are you eating or drinking in the vehicle? Smoking in the vehicle? Putting lipstick on? Looking at yourself in the mirror? We're going to talk about all those things, okay? And all those things in itself can contribute to incidents. I want you to think about yourself and how many of you self-medicate for a headache, allergies, you're just not feeling good, you took some NyQuil before you went to bed last night, you're on prescription medication for something, maybe you had an injury outside of work. Are you taking medications? And we're going to talk about prescription medications versus over-the-counter medications and how that can cause you to be an impaired driver. And then also, hopefully nobody is using alcohol in driving. So one of the big things is, how are you as an agency verifying that your employees have a current driver's license? Do you have a vehicle checkout policy? How do you know? So they have the driver's license. They show it to the individual that's responsible for the pool cars or assigned vehicles. Is anybody running a motor vehicle their driving record and making sure that their driver's license is valid at some point? Driver's license can be suspended for various reasons these days. Failure to pay child support, failure to pay tickets, failure to pay fines. And somewhere along the way, we need to ensure that our drivers have a current driver's license. Tell you another story. I had a gentleman, when I worked in my other company, I was also responsible for a fleet of 70 vehicles, ranging from a regular vehicle all the way up to like a big moving truck. And this gentleman was a little box van, and he ran a mother and her 3 kids off the side of the road. And we had on there that bumper sticker, 1-800 how's my driving? And that 1-800 number went directly to the owner of my business. So she called, gave my owner an earful, and we pulled him into the office and we did a rapid driver's license. I pulled his driver's license, found out he was driving on a suspended license. So if we had injured that family, our insurance wouldn't have covered it. We put that person in a vehicle and let him drive that vehicle, and his driver's license was suspended. Talk about liability, big time. Okay, so I want you to think about that. Do your employees have current driver's license? Jeff just handed me the VDH driver safety policy, and if you look under the driver safety rules, the last bullet says report any change in status of your driver's license to your supervisor when driving is required for your position. So think about if you have a reckless driving, DUI, DWI, you need to probably notify. If you dig further down into state policy and procedure, the Department of General Services that kind of oversees their fleet management, they have this, I'm not going to bore you with it, but it's about, I think 40 or 50 pages of policy. And in there it states you have 3 days to notify, I believe it's 3 days to notify if you are convicted of reckless driving, DUI, DWI, vehicular manslaughter, or some other things. So hopefully we don't have anybody with vehicular manslaughter, but think about that. Make sure you know your policies and procedures. And if you're responsible for people driving vehicles, and I know that the central office is in the process of looking at this whole vehicle license and how we're going to monitor it and measure it. So I would say get with your HR people. I know that there's some stuff being worked on in the background. Is your vehicle mechanically sound? Do you have preventative maintenance schedules? Are they being inspected? Are you making sure that everything's the way it's supposed to be? Are you healthy enough to drive today? Do you feel well enough to get behind that car? Does your headache so bad that the lights are distorting your vision, or the pain so bad it's distorting your vision? Should you really be driving? Nowadays, with teleworking, we have, if you are allowed to telework, let me rephrase that, then there are some other options. You may be able, if you're not feeling well enough to actually come into the office, you may be able to telework and work from home and have a little bit more flexibility. Are you too tired to drive? Anybody been driving down the road and do the head bob? You know, and you don't realize that you've just passed 5 miles of your driving and you don't even realize you've done it. I'm on the road a lot for work. That happens to me quite a bit. I'm just driving. 460 gets me every time out towards Roanoke, going and coming. And it's right before Farmville, right after Appomattox, in that area. My head starts to, and I know I need to stop, get out, walk around my car a couple times, because it gets me. Okay, especially if I've driven out in the morning, worked an 8-hour day, and then had to drive back home. I'm tired. We all get tired. Or if I didn't get a good night's sleep the night before. Prescription medications, self-treating. Are you diabetic? Do you know when your sugar's getting low? Do you need to think about those things? You're in a vehicle, even if it's a state vehicle. Then the last thing is, are you familiar with this vehicle? Is it a new vehicle that you just got into, you've never driven before? All of us have done that. You get in the vehicle, you turn it on, you pull out, you go to hit the brakes, and you, because the brakes are real sensitive. So you kind of jerk. Think about that. Make sure in the parking lot you get familiar with the vehicle before you get out there on the street. Let's talk about some strategies for safe driving. We can't predict what the other person's going to do. So you're driving in traffic like this. Lots of us, not of those of you who are in Southwest Virginia. Well, on 81 maybe. Northern Virginia, Tidewater, Richmond to some extent. This is the daily stuff sometimes we have to contend with. So we're driving along, okay? And you see this ambulance in the far right-hand or far left-hand lane. You see the little silver vehicle kind of changing lanes. Do you see anything else in this picture that might have you worried? If you're driving along, we're sitting in our car, and we're looking out at this, what are you thinking about? There's two things that I automatically are looking at. Look behind the ambulance and that taxi that's all the way over on the shoulder. Yep. You probably didn't notice them. What's happening there? What's he going to do? Okay? Then I want you to look at all the way on the right side of the picture. Look underneath the underpass, right by that yellow sign in the upper corner. What's going on up there? Did you see that when you first looked at the picture? Okay? This is what we call situational awareness when you're on the road. Think, plan, and kind of forecast what might be happening. You're driving, brake lights are on. You want to make sure you're looking ahead, determining, okay, what's my plan of action? What am I going to do? Now, those of you in Northern Virginia, this is going to be difficult when I say this, because if you give somebody an inch and a half in front of you, or 2 inches, they're squeaking in there. So you've got to come up with some different driving strategies. Tidewater's the same way. They're aggressive drivers, extremely aggressive drivers. So you have to make sure that you're prepared. Sometimes we're not going to be prepared, but we've got to be looking at the situation. What could possibly happen? Where's my escape route? How can I prevent myself from getting into an accident? Okay? You've got to be engaged and not distracted, especially in heavy traffic when for some reason you're going along at 65, 85 miles an hour and all of a sudden brake lights. Okay? What are we going to do? And that's what we're going to talk about. So, is your vehicle...
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
Hi, Michelle, this is Jan Trent. I'm in Cumberland Plateau.
Okay.
I'm sitting here with my nurse manager. And we sort of have a question related to employee, like with a chronic health condition. You talked about being, knowing that they're ill. Are they well enough to drive and do their work that day? Say we have somebody with diabetes that's driving their own personal vehicle to go out and do a nursing home screening, a baby care screening. They're fine when they leave, but they become ill while they're out in the field. If they have an accident, is that a workers' comp claim? Is that a liability issue? Whose insurance is that on? Something like that. I mean, I know all of that would have to be investigated and analyzed, but if they become ill when they're in the field and it's a serious condition we're aware of and they chronically deal with, then how do we approach that?
Well, the first thing is the agency's policy, as well as workers' comp policy, is anytime a employee is injured in the scope of their job, you should be reporting a workers' comp accident. The health department does not make the workers' comp decisions. That's Managed Care Innovations through DHRM. So to protect you as the agency and to protect the employee, you need to file that claim. From a liability perspective, and I'm going to tell you this with a caveat that I could be proven wrong, because every time I say something, it could be the total opposite. You need to remember that if you're putting an employee in a vehicle, whether it's their own or whether it's the state's, and they're being reimbursed mileage, so I'm assuming if they're in their own vehicle, they're probably being reimbursed some sort of mileage. They are on a job status, so to speak. So if they were at a client's home, they got sick, and they weren't able, and they decided they were going to get in the vehicle and drive back, there may be some liability associated with the agency. I can't say that's going to be the legal people to figure out. What I would hope would be that individual, if they became sick, would say, I'm not well enough to drive, and would call a supervisor, a family member, or call somebody to come and get them. And that's what I would promote. That's what I would promote personally, is if you don't feel well enough, and then supervisors and managers need to understand that. If somebody's sick and they need help, somebody has to be able to go get them. That's part of our responsibility too. It's no different than if they were in the work environment here in an office setting and something happened, you would render medical aid to them or offer to call a family member to come get them. So I would hope it would be the same. You'd give them the same courtesy out in the field. Now, it might take a little bit longer to get to them, but yes, there could potentially be liability associated with an incident involving a personal vehicle. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It was clear. And my first reaction as a gut instinct was to file the workers' comp claim, let MCI work through that in the investigation process too. The only question I have about is if they were to call in the field, we actually sort of had this scenario happen. We had somebody that got very sick at work, was unable to drive. We had a coworker drive that individual home. What if that person were to be hit by a coal truck here on one of these back roads? Does that, I mean, we would follow that as workers' comp because they're on the clock and they would look at that. So I'm assuming that even if another employee were involved, to take that person home, then that would sort of flow through. They're on the clock. They're doing this to, in a work capacity and a job status, and that would also be covered, yes?
Well, I can't tell you whether it would be covered or not because I don't make the claims decisions. But yes, the important thing would be the employee was assigned a task to go pick up the employee A, and it was in the scope of their job, other duties as assigned. And I think the important thing is, in the event that happened, that you give detailed information through the claims process, through HR, that they understand employee A was sick. We sent employee B to help assist them get home. And in the process of employee B returning back to the office, an incident occurred. So I think as long as information is documented in detail, because that sometimes when a claim does or doesn't get denied or gets accepted or denied is because we don't have detail enough. So yes, I would say it would still be in the course of their employment because they were asked to do something. Do you agree with me, Jeff?
Yeah. One other thing with vehicle accidents, if it is work related, and even if the employee is not claiming any injury at that time, you still file a work comp claim. If the police are involved, we need the police report. And the reason that we do that, even though if the employee is not claiming injury at that time, it could be a couple of days later, their neck is starting to hurt or something like that. So we want to be sure to go ahead and get it in as a record only, just in case.
Yeah. It's always better to err on the side. Let me just say this, you don't get dinged from a workers' comp perspective for the number of claims that you submit. You don't get in trouble for that. Nobody gets in trouble for filing a claim. Let me just rephrase that. You don't get dinged for the number of claims. It's the dollars spent that really drives up your workers' comp costs. So we would rather have record onlys, which means we're just filing it 2 months from now. My knee's as big as a cantaloupe because I stepped off the curb funny. And we're not going to remember 2 months from now what happened. So that's why it's important to get that information in as soon as possible. Did I answer your questions regarding the vehicle and the primary and the secondary employees?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So vehicle operations, what we want to make sure of, are you doing self-inspections before you get in your cars? Are your tires, are they inflated? Has the oil been checked? Are the fluids checked? When you get in the vehicle, are there any lights indicating that something's going wrong with the vehicle? Hopefully you're doing more than just your annual inspections where they take the vehicle to somebody and put the sticker on it. Hopefully you're at least doing walk-around inspections to make sure, oh, look, there's something leaking out from underneath my car. Even if it's your private vehicle, look and see. And if there are problems, tell somebody about it, and the person that's responsible for getting it fixed needs to get it fixed. The last thing we want to do is put any of you in a vehicle that has a problem and expect you to drive it. Okay? That's just opening the door for an accident. I'm hoping everybody's using their seatbelt. It's law. Does anybody have to, I don't know if, I think some people do personal care aids, or some of the WIC people maybe, or the infant child care. You may transport children in your vehicles. I saw a couple workers' comp claims. So if you're transporting a child in a vehicle, make sure you have a child restraint, whether it's a car seat, a booster seat, whatever's appropriate for the age. Okay? It's the law. According to DMV and driver's law, you have to be 8 years old and secured in a safety seat based on their size and weight, or you have to have a waiver. Okay? So you can go out to the DMV driver's manual and look at that. Any questions on, make sure your seat belts work. The other thing I see, because I'm out and about a lot on the road, and I wish I could have like a dash cam on my car, because I'd love to take pictures as people go down the road, especially when I see somebody in a state vehicle. And there are certain people that are worse about it than others, but have you ever seen somebody driving and have a seatbelt with a safety pin on it? Because they don't want and the diagonal restraint is loose, so it doesn't cut their neck right here. If you get in an accident, you're going through that windshield, okay? The lap belt is not going to stop you. It might slice you in half. But the chest restraint is to hold you up against the seat so you don't go through the windshield. How many people have materials that they're hauling around in their vehicle? Is your load secure, whatever it is? Papers, books, training materials. Is it secure in your back seat if you're driving a van, if you got it in your back seat or in your trunk? What I don't want to happen is you just got stuff in your back seat. You have to slam on the brakes because somebody in front of you slammed on their brakes. And the next thing you know, 20 pounds of stuff comes flying from the back towards you, hits you in the back of the head, and now we've got a bigger issue. Okay? Think about that. Make sure the stuff in your vehicle is secure. It can't fly around. It's not going to fly through the windshield or come flying up front at you. Okay? Do you have a four-wheel drive vehicle, an all-wheel drive vehicle? Just because it's four-wheel drive, and those of you out in Southwest Virginia and those parts that have lots of snow, four-wheel drive doesn't mean that you can drive better in the snow. It just gives you better traction, okay? It does not necessarily mean that, oh, I've got this SUV so I can go 65 miles an hour in 3 inches of snow. No, it doesn't mean that, okay? You still have problems with stopping. You're still going to slide, you're going to go into fishtails, all those types of things. Now, do you know if you have a front-wheel drive versus a rear-wheel drive vehicle and what the difference is? Most of us have front-wheel drive vehicles. That means that they actually pull the car, so you have it's heavier in the front. Rear-wheel drive just means that you have better steering control. If you look on some of the newer cars, if you have a newer car, they have that traction control option. It's the squiggly line button in the car. If you get into inclement weather, you want to push that on. Some of it actually trips itself over, and if you slide just a little bit, it'll put the traction control on for you so that you can get better traction going down the street. Just know what type of vehicles you have, and don't be fooled by all that. You still have to have safe driving practices. Let's talk about inclement weather. I work in Richmond, and I have to drive to Roanoke today. It's nice and sunny here in Richmond. You know, it's 45 degrees. It's great. I start out. I don't look at the news. I don't look at the computer. I don't do that. So I start driving out. I get to about Bedford, and all of a sudden the snow starts. It's getting slushy on the roads. Crud. Now I got to go do work, and I got to drive home in this mess. So I'm doing what I need to do in Roanoke, and they get the storm of the century. They get dumped on. Now what do I do? How am I going to get home? VDOT's closed the roads down. Traffic's backed up. Make sure that when you're traveling, especially in those areas, and especially during the time of the year, that you think about weather conditions. Look at that before you leave the office or your home to determine, is it safe for me to go to certain places today? Okay. Now, in very rural areas, especially Southwest and the western part of the state, you might be able to get up the mountain today, but you're not going to get back down it this afternoon. So you guys know that weather better than anybody else, what roads close. If you can't get to where you need to go, think about that, and maybe we need to reschedule. That goes back to the whole, what's your plan? Have you scheduled it? Do people know where you're at? Okay? Think about that. Hopefully you are. Also, do you have emergency kits in your vehicle, especially for those of you out where snow and ice could be an issue? Do you have a blanket? Do you have extra water? Do you have extra clothes? Do you have boots? Do you have gloves? Do you have an emergency kit? Okay? I never believed in an emergency kit till I lived in a little place called Plattsburgh, New York. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. But this little girl, when she graduated from college, just 2 years ago, no, I'm teasing, a long time ago, took my first job at a hospital up in Plattsburgh, New York. It's about 15 miles away from the Canadian border. Started snowing October 31st. We got 32 inches of snow. I said, I changed my mind. What in the world was I thinking coming all the way up north to the North Country? Well, I learned real fast. Extra food, extra water, extra clothes, extra blanket. Because if you get stuck, and I have been stuck on the Northway, I was stuck for a day and a half. When you get snow and ice dumped, they can't get you. So make sure you have those emergency kits. Do you have flares in your vehicles? Do you have first aid kits in your vehicles? Okay? Be prepared. You may need to adjust your trip. You may need to say, you know what, the weather's getting really bad on this side of the mountain, and you need to make that phone call and say, look, I'm coming into the office, I'm going home, the weather's bad, I need to change my schedule. You are responsible for your personal safety. Nobody else is. Okay? If you start getting in weather conditions that are bad, and you know the areas that are bad, especially the roads that get closed quick and bad, and that's where you have to be, you need to make that decision. You have the right to say the weather's getting bad, I need to readjust my schedule. Please do it. We don't want anybody being a frozen popsicle or getting hurt or something else happening. Okay, another pet peeve of mine. When you get in your vehicle, whether it's your personal vehicle or your state vehicle, please scrape the snow. Scrape it off all windshields, the front, the sides, the back, and the top, okay, and the hood. Because what's going to happen is as your car heats up, you got all that stuff on your windshield, on the hood of your car, and you're going down the road, it's going to blow up on the windshield. The worst part is you get all that ice and snow, you don't clean it off, or you haven't gone anywhere, it's thawed and melted, thawed and melted, thawed and melted, and now you got big sheets of ice. And everybody's seen it, those big tractor trailers, and that huge sheet of ice that flies off, it can hurt you, okay? So think about that. And then if you're in a state vehicle, and that sheet of ice flies off and hits the person behind you and breaks their windshield, guess who's responsible? Your agency, if they can catch you. You know, if the state police are there, they're able to get your driver, the license plate of the vehicle. So make sure you clean your vehicle off. This is a quick little quiz. How do you hold the steering wheel when you drive? Do you hold it 10 and 2, 9 and 3, 8 and 4, 7 and 5, or do you like to lay back and put your hand up at number 12 and recline back? Okay? You see people, that's why y'all are laughing. Okay? Where do you put your hands? Okay, most people put them here, said 10 and 2. Okay? I want you, now, most of us who are mature in our work experience or our life experiences and started driving before 1990, not me, but yeah, I started driving before 1990. That's what we were taught, 10 and 2 or 9 and 3, right? Because that's what nowadays, you need to be driving at 8 and 4 or 7 and 5. And here's why. I want you to think about it. We all got airbags in our car, right? Anybody ever have an airbag deploy? Okay, you're driving at 10 and 2, so you're up here, okay? That airbag deploys, guess what? Bam, right in your eyes, right to your face, because your hands are coming off that steering wheel when that airbag deploys, okay? So 10 and 2 and 9 and 3, you're going to have a face, you're going to get hurt from the airbag deploying, you are. You're going to get burned because it's going to be like road rash or rug burn. That thing's coming out with all that force and all that power, you're going to get a little bit of rash. What we want to do is we want your elbows and your arms to drive into the seat versus driving into your face. 55 miles an hour, you come to a sudden stop, and you got your hands on 10 and 2, they're coming towards your face, okay? You will break bones in your face. We want you to either drive at, I prefer 8 and 4. 9 and 3 is still kind of sketchy, but 8 and 4, 7 and 3, okay? And the new steering wheels, if you've driven a new car recently, they've kind of redesigned ergonomically the steering wheels. You probably do drive at 9 and 3 and don't realize it because of the way the steering wheels are these days. When you get in a vehicle, do you adjust the seat before you pull out? Do you sit down? Make sure you can reach the foot, make sure you can reach everything. Is it adjusted? Can you raise it up, raise it back, your back, the tilt of it? Adjust your seat before you start down the road. We have had accidents where people put the key in the ignition, they started driving down the road, they're having trouble reaching the pedal, and they adjust the seat going down the road. And they hit the wrong way, and next thing you know, something's happening to them. Adjust your mirrors before you get on the road. Sometimes as you're going down the road, if you have a little blind spot, you may have to adjust a side mirror. Do you guys use those Chevrolet? They look like a PT Cruiser. Are they the RR4? I don't know what they're called, but they're silver. They look like a PT Cruiser.
It's HHIs.
Yes. Okay. Do you guys use those?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They're notorious for blind spots. Okay.
Yeah, they should not even have them in the state car. Who would do that?
Actually, somebody filed a claim to remove them.
I believe it. We've had lots of accidents. I mean, not just your agency, but we've had lots of accidents. And the problem is there's that blind spot on, as you're going down, like if another car in a lane is between the rear passenger doors and the end of the car, and they're in that spot, like right kind of where the wheel well is and the tire, you cannot see them. You cannot see them. Been there, done that. Because I've sat in them and driven them because we've had some issues with it. So the only thing, do you have them assigned to you, or are they all are they pool cars, or are they assigned to any of the agencies? Any of the health districts?
Marshall?
Yes.
Marshall, this is Cumberland Plateau. We have one assigned to our dental person, and they had a pretty significant claim a couple of years ago, all due to not being able to see the blind spots. And she had a significant injury that she actually still suffers from, is having problems from today. And we actually requested that that vehicle be replaced. We've had several complaints. And the neighboring health districts that have them also, have had some complaints about those vehicles.
I can't get you a new vehicle, so I wish I could get you guys new vehicles. A inexpensive fix or help, if you go to any of the big like Walmarts or the auto parts stores, they have those they're called like convex mirrors. They're round, they're a little like about the size of a $50 that you can stick in the bottom corner. That helps. It's not going to help 100%, but it will at least help. You just have to remember that the object's closer than they appear in the mirror, but that will help a little bit. When you put it on there, it didn't help you guys. You got to put it down in the bottom left-hand corner of the mirror for it to help. So that's it. I can't get you new vehicles. I know it's a problem statewide, not just with your agency, but it seems like that's all the vehicles most of the agencies have these days from Enterprise. So beware of that. Know that when you're going to change lanes, you put your blinker on, and you may physically have to double check several times. I know that's a problem. I don't know how we can fix that problem besides getting a new vehicle, and money's just tight these days. Go ahead. All right. So we're adjusted in the vehicle. We've got in, we've checked our car, we put our seatbelt on, we adjusted our mirrors. Now we're headed out. What you want to make sure of is when you're driving like this, that you're constantly looking ahead of you to make sure you know what's going on ahead of me. What kind of traffic problems could there be ahead of us? Could there be a sudden stop around that corner? Is there an emergency vehicle over there? Are there flashing lights? Because flashing lights are magnets, and everybody has to look at them and rubberneck as we go by, okay? Then at some point, you need to start looking behind you. Check your mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds. What's going on? Is there something happening? Is there somebody tailgating you? Is there a car coming up fast? What's going on all around you? Situational awareness. Make sure you know what your plan of action is. If somebody's coming down on that merge lane there on the right-hand side, and you have this car coming up fast, and the first emergence coming up fast, are you going to speed up to try to beat them? Are you going to slow down and let them merge in? Is there somebody tailgating you that isn't going to allow you to do that? What are you going to do? Situational awareness. Be prepared. Okay, Jeff. All right, so we're looking ahead, and all of a sudden, sometimes you can't hear emergency personnel coming up on you until they're right there, and it scares you. The way that the speed that they're going, even if they have their lights and sirens on, sometimes you can't hear them until they're right up on you. Uh-oh, now what do I do? Make sure you have that plan of action, okay? Know where you need to be. If you need to pull over on the shoulder, pull over on the shoulder. Sometimes we don't have shoulders to pull over on, okay? I personally try to drive in the right-hand lane. It gives me better options. Sometimes if you're in the left lane or the fast lane, they call it, people lock in. People are going to lock in the right-hand lane. But at least if you're in the right-hand lane, there's usually, except in certain places, a shoulder that you can kind of pull over to, okay? Think about your driving and how are you going to protect yourself. So you just got to know what's going on around you. Look near and far, both sides. Check your mirrors, every 3 to 4 seconds. Look for those blind spots and then size it all up. Is there some vehicle, a pedestrian in the roadway? Is a car broken down? What are the road conditions? Are there potholes? What's going on? Be aware. Okay. Are you using your turn signal? Now, I work a lot with state troopers. If you switch lanes more than once without using your signal and they're behind you, they will pull you over. Your blinker should at least blink 3 times and then make your move over. Okay? Make sure you know, and it's telling everybody what you're going to do. We can change it. Okay? Now, those of us in certain parts of the state use our horn a lot more frequently than others. I'm a horn user. I blow my horn a lot. I get a little bit of road rage sometimes, and I'll blow my horn. But sometimes you need to use it when somebody's trying to cut you off and they don't realize you're there. Use your horn. That's what it's there for, okay? Make sure you're using your turn signal. Make sure people understand what you want to do. And sometimes I know that we're supposed to go the speed limit. Northern Virginia is terrible for this on 95 headed north. If you're going 55, there's some certain sections of 95 north that's 55, but if you're going 55 miles an hour, even if you're in the putt-putt lane on the right-hand side, people are passing you and honking you. At least go with the flow of the traffic, because at that point, if they're all going 85 and you're putting along at 55, you're creating a hazard and something's going to happen. At least try to stay with the speed of traffic. I'm not saying go 85, but go about 60. Don't be putting along there. And sometimes you just don't have a choice. I will tell you, if you travel up to Northern Virginia, it's 65 once you hit the Springfield, right before you hit the Springfield interchange, and then it goes right down to 55. I know, unfortunately. So, you can change. All right, so what is your escape route? There's a problem. You see it happening. Where are you going to go? Go ahead, Jeff. All right. What happens if somebody's tailgating you? You have no place to go. You're in the right-hand lane. Somebody's tailgating you. What do you want to do? Slam on the brakes? No, because they're probably going to rear end you. My suggestion is you start to slow down, but you tap your brakes a couple times. Usually it'll back somebody off and they'll whip around you. Sometimes not. It'll make it worse. You have to remember that people have road rage. People are aggressive drivers. We cannot control the other drivers. All we can do is control ourselves and put these practices into place to try to prevent somebody from hitting us. Okay? If you've got to pull over onto the shoulder to let the person that's in such a big hurry pass you by, do that. Okay? Remember, situational awareness, you have to make sure you know what's going on around you. That's why we can't be distracted. Okay, John. All right, merging. Oh, merging is a difficult thing for us to do. Have you ever been coming onto an interstate and the person in front of you just stops on the merge lane? If we're going to merge into traffic, have you ever been on the interstate and somebody just slams on the brakes and they stop before they merge in? Okay, what you want to do, a merge lane is yield, but it doesn't mean that you come to a complete stop. So there's two things you have to think about. As you're coming onto the interstate or into a merge lane, you need to slow down slightly, check, and then keep going. You don't want to come to a complete stop. If you're in the right lane where there's a merge point, if you can get over into the left-hand lane, you need to get over into the left-hand lane, let the person merge, and then get back over. Don't speed up. Don't tailgate somebody. Let the person merge. Okay? So just know what your merge points are. So we're driving down the interstate, and we have to think about our safe strategies. What are we going to do? Are we going left? Are we going slow? Or are we going right? Okay? Know before you get here, before that exit, where you're supposed to go. What I don't want to see people do is be in the left-hand lane and cut over 3 lanes of traffic to get over there. And there's workers' comp claims associated with that. Okay? So you've got to know that. All right. Check your mirrors, look front and to the sides, signal your intentions, and then make sure that you know exactly where you're going and what decision you're going to make. And if that means you made the wrong one and you have to turn around or pull off, you got off the wrong exit, that's fine. Just turn around and get back where you need to go. All right. So we're at an intersection. This is where most of our accidents with VDH happen. We're sitting at a stoplight or a traffic light, and you're sitting there, and all of a sudden somebody rear ends you. Is there anything we can do to prevent that? Yeah, there is some things we can do. If you're looking, as long as you're not looking down at your cell phone, at your notes, fiddling with the radio, eating or drinking in the car, which, by the way, you're not supposed to be doing in a state vehicle. The only time you're allowed to be talking on a phone on state vehicles if you're pulled over. And I will tell you, I see tons of people in state vehicles on cell phones. Whether it's hands-free or not, I see them holding it up. Okay? You're distracted. Fiddling with the radio is distraction. Okay? If you're sitting at a stoplight or a traffic stop or a stop sign and you are paying attention, remember this is all situational awareness, and somebody's coming up kind of fast, you can start tapping your lights. Okay? It might not stop the accident, but at least it might grab their attention. Okay? Remember, these are strategies to help you prevent injuries. And think about those things as a driver as you go forward. Okay? When a light changes green, don't just go right through. Wait a few seconds because there's possibly somebody else is trying to beat the yellow light. And they're going to run a red light. Running red lights are terrible these days. People are running them right and left. Wait for a few seconds and then proceed through the intersection. Okay? You can change it. All right, what about backing up? We've had some backing up accidents. All right? Remember, when we're talking about workers' comp claims, we're only talking about the cost to the employee. We're not talking about the cost associated with the vehicle itself. That's the Department of Risk Management. So when we looked at those vehicle losses that were $289,000, that's just personal injury. And that's just the employee personal injury. That's not if we struck somebody else as an agency and hurt an innocent person, or damage to their vehicle, or damage to the state vehicle. Okay? So think about that. Backing up. Do you look before you back up? Some agencies have policies where you don't back out. You back into your parking spot so that when you go to leave, you pull forward all the time. Sometimes that's not possible, but if you're by yourself, you need to inch out slowly. If you're with somebody should be outside that vehicle spotting for you as you're backing out, and then they can get in the car and drive away. Okay? That can prevent backup injuries. Following too close. How do we know what following too close is? Anybody ever heard of the 2-3-4 second rule? So the 2-3 second rule means that the vehicle in front of you passes a fixed object on either side. So this is where those circles are. And you start to count. How long it takes you to get to that particular spot is how many seconds away you are. So when we're traveling on a clear weather or dry roads, you should use the 2-second rule. That means you should only follow it should be 2 seconds apart. For moderate speed traffic, like 35 to 45 miles an hour on wet roads, or in situations like this where your visibility is reduced, you want to leave about a 3-second space between you and the vehicle in front of you. And then once you get up to higher speeds, the weather gets really bad, your visibility is reduced, you want to do the 4 to 6 seconds. Okay? That's going to help prevent rear end collisions. Stopped in traffic. This is not going to apply, like I said, to Northern Virginia or probably Tidewater area, because if you left this much space between you and the car in front of you, someone's sneaking in when you're stopped in traffic. Ideally, what you want to do is when you're sitting in traffic, you want to be able to look at the bottom of the tire of the person in front of you. And the reason we say that is because if you were to be rear-ended, there's enough room there, if you have your foot on the brake, that may potentially cause you from doing the domino effect and rear-ending another person. Okay? So that's about a half of a car length to 3/4 of a car length, depending on the vehicles these days. So when you're stopped, you want to look at the distance in front of you, and you should be able to see the bottom of the back tire of the vehicle in front of you. That's not going to be possible all the time. I've sat through tons of tunnel traffic in Tidewater, through downtown, Hampton Roads Bridge tunnels, and the Midtown, and you leave that much room, people are squeaking in. So use your best judgment. I mean, you're crawling along usually, or you're sitting stopped. So here we are in traffic. Is passing going to make a difference at this point? Not really. Use your turn signals. It all goes back to you as the driver. Are you using your turn signals? Pass only one vehicle at a time. If you have to pass on a 2-lane road, follow the rules of the road, and then make sure you have enough distance. Make sure it's not a blind corner, you're not going up and down hills. Make sure it's a broken line, not a solitary line. Watch when you're passing parked vehicles, somebody doesn't dart out in front of you. All those types of things. State law. We got a tow truck, EMS, police on the side of the road. How many of you slow your speed down? How many of you, if they're on the right-hand shoulder, slow down and move over into the middle lane? Okay? It's a law. They can ticket you. Not to say that they're always going to ticket you, but they can. And really the reason this law went into effect was because our emergency service personnel are being struck and hit because people are rubbernecking. When you're driving your vehicle And I tease all the time that the lights are magnets because people are driving and they turn their head to look. When you turn your head to look, what do you think the car's doing? It's turning in that direction your head is pointed. Okay? So there's lots of statistics out there. There's lots of studies that show that. So remember, slow down, move over when you see state vehicle or EMS. And this is why. Okay? This happened on I-64 outside Goochland in November 2009. The trooper was actually inside this vehicle writing his ticket when a car slammed into him. Fortunately, he had non-life-threatening injuries, but the driver of the vehicle that struck the trooper was charged with reckless driving and failure to move over. So you can see that the trooper that walked away from this was lucky. We've had some that haven't been so lucky. School buses. How many of you encounter school buses? Okay, if they're stopped and they're flashing lights, you need to stop. We see people run all that all the time. The only time you do not have to stop when a school bus is loading or unloading children is if you are on a divided highway with a median or a barrier. Okay? You do not have to stop. But any other time, you have to stop for a vehicle or for the school bus. Okay? Distracted driving. All right. Do you guys use GPSs in your vehicles? Okay. Hopefully you're not trying to program the GPS going down the road. That's distracted driving. Messing with the radio, talking on the cell phone. I'm not sure. Does your policy say they can be hands-free when they're talking or no?
No use at all.
No use at all. Okay, that's what I thought. So it says do not use cell phones to include text messaging, and the use of hands-free devices while operating a motor vehicle is strictly prohibited. So, you shouldn't be on that. You shouldn't be eating or drinking, or hopefully you're not smoking anyway in a state vehicle, but all those things are distracted drivers. If you have passengers in the car with you, they're a distraction. Because you're talking, you're laughing, you're having a good time, you're not really paying attention. If you have a client and their child in the back seat, the child's screaming and yelling and crying and upset, you're distracted. And remember, this is situational awareness. This is about you preventing incidents from happening. Teenagers and texting, you've seen those people out there driving, texting, and using cell phone. They're weaving all over the road. Back away from them. They're distracted. There's some research out there that says most of the injuries happen to distracted drivers. It also says, if you look at the very bottom bullet, that using a cell phone, whether handheld or hands-free, while operating a vehicle is basically like operating a vehicle drunk. So think about that. How many of you have been on the cell phone, answered the cell phone while you're driving down the road, whether it's your personal vehicle or the state vehicle? Okay? Think about that. You're an impaired driver at that point. Vehicle emergencies. Do you know what to do? What if your tire blows out? Do you know where your spare tire is? Is there a donut? Do you know where the jack is? Do you have to change it? Do you call somebody to come change it? Do you pull over on the side of the road? How far do you pull over? What do you do? What if you have a mechanical breakdown? Do you know what you're supposed to do? Who do you call? Do you stay in your car or do you leave the vehicle? Do you stand on the side of the road or not? Okay? Your best bet is to get off on the side of the road as far as possible. Put your hazard lights on. If you're not far enough off the shoulder of the road, you need to exit the vehicle and get away from the vehicle as far up the bank as possible. Because chances are somebody could hit you with your vehicle being broken down. Okay? There's also those of us who are women that we might need to consider depending on our location. Might be safer for us to stay in the car until law enforcement gets there, and if somebody comes up to help you, don't roll down the window, crack the window just a little bit so that you can hear them. There's all kinds of things that can happen out there. Know your plan. What's going to happen and what are you going to do? What if your car catches fire? You need to get away from the car as far as possible in a safe distance, because there is the potential, if it takes a while for them to get there, depending on the type of vehicle it is, there is the car fires are fast and there's the potential it could explode if it gets to the gas tank. How about a vehicle crash? You have all the documentation inside your glove box, the packet of information that tells you you've got to call state police. You got to fill out all those forms. If you are in a state vehicle, you are required to call 911 and state police have to come before you leave the scene of a crash, regardless of how minor the fender bender might be. Has everybody seen your safe driving policy for VDH? There are some specific safety rules there. What I didn't talk about, and I'll talk about it real quick, is making sure that if you self-medicate, that you're not an impaired driver. It happens quite a bit. Even if you are taking prescription medications, it's important that if they say do not drive or operate heavy equipment or a vehicle, that you follow those rules. If you're feeling hazy or groggy because of medication that you're taking, you need to consider that as well. Think about Benadryl. Benadryl for some people makes them really, really loopy. Other people it doesn't affect. So you've got to make sure that you've got to make sure that you're you know how you can handle the medications that you're taking.
If you guys go to the OHR webpage, you'll see safety on the left hand. Once you go there, click policies and programs, and our driver safety policy is listed with all of our other safety policies.